I saw it happen. Claire stood beside me at the dinner table, smiling sweetly as she poured my water. Then in one quick practice motion, she slipped something into my glass. Tiny white pills, the kind most people wouldn't even notice. But I used to be a nurse. My heart didn't race. I didn't gasp, I simply smiled back, and when she turned to grab the salad, I switched our glasses. Then I watched calm, silent, as my daughter-in-law lifted the poisoned water to her lips. Because in that moment, I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the only one in that room who knew the truth. If this opening made you feel something, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what would you have done in my place. And where are you watching from tonight? I'd really love to know. I never imagined I would end up living in my son's house at 62. For most of my life, I had been fiercely independent. I worked as a registered nurse for over 3 decades, raised my son Ethan on my own after his father passed, and built a quiet, stable life in a modest home just outside Portland. That house wasn't just wood and drywall. It was every double shift, every sacrifice, every birthday cake baked at midnight after a long day on my feet. Selling it wasn't an easy decision, but after retirement, the silence grew heavier than I expected. The routines that once filled my days disappeared, and suddenly I was alone with too much time and too many memories. When Ethan suggested I come stay with him and his wife Claire just for a little while, it sounded reasonable. "Mom, it'll be good for you," he told me over the phone, his voice warm but slightly insistent. "You don't have to be alone. We have the space, and honestly, I'd feel better knowing you're with us." Claire had chimed in shortly after, her tone polished and almost too perfect. "We'd love to have you, Aurora, really. It's important for family to be close, especially now." At the time, I remember feeling touched, wanted even. Looking back now, I realized something else was hidden beneath their words. Something I didn't yet understand. Their home in Northern California was everything mine wasn't. Large, modern, immaculate in a way that didn't feel lived in. Every surface seemed carefully curated like a magazine spread, rather than a place where real people made messes and memories. Claire thrived in that environment. She was the kind of woman who looked effortlessly put together at all times. Perfect hair-tailored outfits, a calm smile that never quite reached her eyes. She greeted me at the door the day I arrived with a hug that felt rehearsed. "Welcome home," she said. But it didn't feel like home. At first, everything seemed fine. Claire showed me to a beautifully prepared guest room. Fresh flowers on the nightstand, crisp white sheets, even a small basket of toiletries arranged like a hotel. It was thoughtful, impressive, and strangely impersonal. I told myself I was overthinking, that this was simply her way of being kind. Ethan, on the other hand, was exactly as I remembered him, gentle, attentive, a little distracted by work, but always trying. He helped carry in my bags, asked if I needed anything, and checked on me throughout the evening. For a moment, I allowed myself to relax. Maybe this would be good, I thought. Maybe this was what the next chapter of my life was supposed to look like, but the feeling didn't last. It started with small things, the kind you could easily dismiss if you wanted to. Claire insisted on handling all the meals. "Oh, Aurora, you've done enough cooking for a lifetime," she said with a light laugh. "Let me take care of you for once." It sounded sweet, generous. But I noticed she didn't just cook. She controlled. Every ingredient, every portion, every plate that was set in front of me. If I offered to help, she would gently but firmly guide me away from the kitchen. No, please, sit, relax. At first I appreciated it. Then I began to notice the pattern. My coffee was always prepared before I came downstairs. My water glass was always filled by her. My meals were plated and served without question. It was as if I'd been quietly removed from any decision-making about what I consumed. Again, I told myself I was imagining things, until the comments started. "They say memory can start slipping earlier than people expect," Claire remarked casually one afternoon while scrolling through something on her tablet. I looked up from the book in my lap. "Excuse me." "Oh, nothing," she said, quickly smiling. "Just something I read, about aging. It's important to be proactive." I let it go. Another time, she gently took my car keys from the counter. "I just think it might be safer if I drive when we go out," she said. "The roads here can be a little tricky." "I've been driving for over 40 years, I replied, keeping my voice even. Of course, she said, her smile never wavering. I'm just thinking ahead. Thinking ahead. That phrase stuck with me. Ethan never contradicted her, not directly, but I began to notice how easily he deferred to her suggestions. If Claire thinks it's best, Mom, he would say, shrugging lightly. She's just looking out for you, looking out for me, that's what they called it. And maybe in the beginning I wanted to believe that was all it was, but deep down something didn't feel right. It wasn't just what Claire said, it was how she said it. The careful choice of words, the way she observed me as if she were taking notes, the subtle shifts in conversation whenever I mentioned my independence, my past, my plans. I started to feel like a subject, not a guest, not even family, a subject. One evening, about 2 weeks after I moved in, I found myself standing alone in the kitchen while Claire was upstairs. The house was quiet. Ethan was still at work. On the counter sat a row of pill bottles. They weren't mine. I recognized most medications by sight. It comes with years in healthcare. These weren't anything I had ever been prescribed. Some looked like mild sedatives. Others, I couldn't immediately identify. I didn't touch them. I didn't need to. Instead, I simply stood there, staring at them, feeling a slow, creeping unease settle into my chest. When Claire came back down, she moved quickly, almost too quickly, to gather them up. "Oh," she said lightly, as if it were nothing. "Just organizing some things." I nodded, pretending not to notice. But I did notice. I noticed everything. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I stopped seeing Claire as simply controlling. I started wondering why. That night, as I lay in bed, staring up at the unfamiliar ceiling, I tried to piece it all together. The comments, the control, the subtle undermining of my independence. It didn't add up, not yet. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't about care, and whatever it was about, I had just begun to see the edges of it. At first, I told myself it was kindness. That's what made it so dangerous. Because when control is wrapped in care, it becomes almost invisible, especially to someone who wants to believe they are still loved, still valued, still safe. But I had spent too many years in hospitals watching subtle changes in behavior, recognizing patterns others missed. And slowly, piece by piece, I began to understand that what Claire was doing wasn't random. It was deliberate. It began with the smallest adjustments. My mornings, for instance, were no longer mine. I used to wake up early, habit more than anything. Years of early shifts had trained my body well, but in this house, I would come downstairs to find my coffee already made, sitting neatly beside a plate of toast or eggs, depending on Claire's plan for the day. "Good morning," she would say, always perfectly composed, already dressed, already in control. "I made you something light. Easy on the stomach. Easy on the stomach." I remember the first time she said that, I laughed softly. My stomach has survived hospital cafeteria food for 30 years. I think it can handle whatever I decide to eat. She smiled. That same calm, unshaken smile. "I know," she said gently. "I just want to make things easier for you." Easier. That word again. At first I didn't push back. It seemed petty to argue over something as simple as breakfast. But then breakfast became lunch, and lunch became dinner. And before long, I realized I hadn't prepared a single meal for myself since I arrived. Every plate was handed to me. Every drink was poured by her. Every choice. Quietly removed. And the more I noticed, the more I realized it wasn't just about food. One afternoon, I went to grab my purse to run a quick errand. I needed a few personal items. Nothing urgent, just things I preferred to pick out myself. My car keys weren't where I left them. I checked the kitchen counter, the small dish near the door, even my coat pocket. Nothing. Claire appeared in the doorway as if she had been waiting for the moment, looking for something she asked. "My keys," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Oh," she said lightly, stepping further into the room. "I put them away. I just thought it might be better if I drove you when you need to go out." I blinked at her. Better. She nodded as if explaining something obvious to a child. "The traffic here can be unpredictable, and I know adjusting to a new area can be overwhelming. I'm not overwhelmed," I said more firmly this time. Her smile didn't falter. "Of course not," she said softly. "I'm just thinking ahead." That phrase again. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I didn't argue further. Not yet. Instead, I watched. Days passed and the pattern deepened. Claire began organizing my belongings without asking. My clothes were rearranged in the closet. My toiletries moved in the bathroom. Even my personal documents, which I'd carefully placed in a drawer, were suddenly stacked differently, as if someone had gone through them. I was just tidying up, she explained when I mentioned it. I thought it would help you stay organized. I was already organized, I said. I know she replied quickly. I just wanted to make it easier, always easier. Ethan, as expected, saw nothing wrong. One evening, I brought it up casually while we sat in the living room. Do you think Claire has been a little over-involved with my things, I asked. He looked up from his laptop, surprised. What do you mean she's been moving things around, handling my meals, taking my keys? It feels a bit excessive. Ethan frowned slightly, but not in concern, more in confusion. Mom, she's just trying to help, he said. You just moved here. It's a big adjustment. I don't need that much help, I replied quietly. He sighed, closing his laptop halfway. I think you're reading too much into it, he said. Claire likes things organized. That's just how she is. I studied his face. He believed that, or at least he wanted to. I raised you to think for yourself, I said gently. Not just accept things because they're presented nicely. His expression softened slightly, but only for a moment. I know, Mom, he said, and I am. I just trust her. Trust her. Those words echoed in my mind long after the conversation ended, because I realized something, then something that unsettled me more than anything Claire had done. Ethan wasn't questioning her, not at all, and that meant whatever was happening, I was alone in seeing it. A few days later, something else shifted. Claire began introducing the idea of my health more directly. I've been reading about cognitive changes in people over 60, she said one afternoon while we sat at the dining table. It can happen very gradually. Sometimes even the person doesn't notice. I set my book down slowly. And why are you telling me this? I asked. She tilted her head slightly, her expression soft with concern. I just think it's important to stay ahead of these things, she said. Monitoring, adjusting routines, making sure everything is as safe as possible. I don't have cognitive issues, I said, keeping my voice steady. Of course, she replied immediately. I'm not saying you do. I just want to be prepared in case anything changes. Prepared. There it was again. Everything about her language pointed toward the future as if she was building something, planning, documenting, shaping a narrative that hadn't yet been spoken out loud. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring into the darkness, replaying every conversation, every small moment that had felt slightly off. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just control. This was groundwork. The next morning, I made a decision. I would stop assuming. I would stop dismissing my instincts. And I would start paying attention the way I used to, like a nurse, like a professional, like someone trained to see what others missed. Because whatever Claire was doing, it wasn't about making my life easier. It was about taking it away from me. Once you allow yourself to see a pattern, it becomes impossible to unsee it. That was the shift. I stopped brushing things off. I stopped explaining Claire's behavior in ways that made me feel comfortable. And instead, I began observing quietly, carefully, the way I had done for years on hospital floors, where noticing the wrong detail too late could cost someone their life. And the first thing I truly noticed was my own body. It started with the fatigue, not the kind that comes from a long day or poor sleep, but something heavier, deeper, like my limbs were weighed down from the inside. It usually came after meals. About 20, maybe 30 minutes later, I would feel a slow fog settling over me. My thoughts would dull. My eyelids would grow heavy. Sometimes I would sit down just for a moment, and wake up an hour later unsure of when I had even fallen asleep. At first, I blamed the adjustment. New home, new routine, emotional stress. It made sense. Until it didn't. Because along with the fatigue came something else. Slips. Tiny lapses in memory that didn't feel like me. I would walk into a room and forget why I was there. Misplace small items. Lose track of conversations halfway through. Now at 62, I was not naive. I knew aging came with changes. But this felt different. Too fast, too sudden, too inconsistent. There were moments when my mind felt sharp as ever, clear-focused, entirely myself. And then, without warning, it would cloud over like someone had drawn a curtain across it. That inconsistency was what bothered me most, because real cognitive decline doesn't behave like a switch. It doesn't turn on and off depending on the time of day. But something else might. Something introduced. Something controlled. The thought came quietly at first. Then it stayed. I didn't act on it immediately. I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. Or at least enough certainty that I wasn't about to accuse someone of something unthinkable based on fear alone. So I started paying attention to timing. When did the fatigue hit after breakfast, after lunch, after dinner, always after something Claire had prepared or handed to me? I began tracking it mentally, then more deliberately. Day 1 breakfast, coffee and toast Claire brought me. 30 minutes later, I felt the familiar heaviness. Day 2, lunch salad and water she poured. Same result. Day 3, dinner pasta, wine water. Again. The pattern was too consistent to ignore, but patterns on their own are not proof, so I needed to test it. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. One afternoon, Claire brought me a glass of iced tea while I was sitting in the living room. "I made this fresh," she said, placing it carefully on the table beside me. "It'll help you stay hydrated." I smiled just as I always did. "Thank you," I said. She lingered for a moment, watching me, waiting. I picked up the glass, lifted it slightly, then set it back down. "I think I'll drink it in a bit," I said casually. "I just finished some water." Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. A flicker, quick, almost imperceptible. "Of course," she said smoothly. "Whenever you like." She walked away. I waited. 10 minutes passed, 20, 30. I sat there doing nothing, simply observing myself. And for the first time in days, I felt completely normal, clear-headed, alert, present, no heaviness, no fog, no sudden pull towards sleep. Nothing. My heart began to beat a little faster, not from panic, but from clarity. That was it. That was the difference. I looked down at the glass of iced tea sitting untouched on the table. Whatever had been happening to me, it was in there. I didn't touch it. Instead, I stood up slowly, picked up the glass, and carried it into the kitchen. My movements were calm, deliberate, no sudden gestures, no signs that anything had changed. Claire was at the counter slicing vegetables. "Oh, you didn't drink it?" she asked, glancing at the glass. "Not yet," I said. "I'll save it for later." She nodded, but I could feel her watching me as I set it down, carefully, exactly where she could see it. That night, I made another small adjustment. At dinner, when Claire poured water into my glass, I waited until she turned away, and then I swapped it with Ethan's. It was a subtle movement, one I had perfected over years of handling delicate tasks under pressure. Ethan, of course, noticed nothing. We ate. We talked. Everything appeared normal, and then about 20 minutes later, I watched my son lean back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. "You okay?" Claire asked quickly, her voice just a shade too sharp. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Just tired, I guess. Long day." I said nothing. I simply observed. Because what I saw in that moment wasn't just confirmation. It was something far more dangerous. Proof. Claire's eyes flicked to his glass, then to mine. For a split second, her composure cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but it was there. Then she smiled. "Oh, you've been working too hard," she said, her tone returning to its usual smoothness. "You should rest after dinner." Ethan nodded, already looking distant, his focus slipping, and I sat there perfectly still, my own mind clearer than it had been in days. There was no doubt left, no room for denial. Whatever Claire had been giving me, it wasn't accidental. It wasn't concern. It wasn't care. It was control. And now, for the first time since I stepped into that house, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. I also knew something else. If I reacted too soon, if I confronted her without understanding the full extent of what she was doing, I would lose any advantage I had. Because Claire wasn't careless. She was careful, calculated, and whatever her plan was, it wasn't finished yet. So I made a decision. I would not confront her. I would not accuse. I would not reveal what I knew. Instead, I would let her continue. Let her believe her plan was working. And while she did, I would watch. I would gather. And when the time came, I would make sure she never had the chance to do this to me again, or to anyone else. Once you see the truth, the world doesn't look the same anymore. Every smile becomes a mask. Every kindness becomes a question. and every ordinary moment becomes a test. That night at dinner, the one where I swapped the glasses, was the first time I fully stepped into that new reality. Claire had prepared everything as usual. The table was set, perfectly white plates, aligned with precision cloth napkins, folded just so, glasses polished until they caught the light like something out of a magazine. It was the kind of dinner setting designed to communicate control without ever saying the word. I took my seat calmly. Ethan sat across from me, already half distracted by something on his phone. Claire moved between us, placing dishes with effortless grace, her expression serene, her movements practiced. And then came the water. She poured mine first. Of course she did. I watched her hand closely this time, not in a way that would give anything away, just enough to confirm what I already suspected. A slight pause, a quick glance toward Ethan, and then there it was. A subtle flick of her fingers. Something dropped. If I hadn't known what to look for, I would have missed it completely, but I didn't miss it. Not anymore. "Here you go, Aurora," she said, setting the glass in front of me with that same gentle smile. "Thank you, Claire," I replied, returning the smile just as smoothly. Inside, I felt nothing. No shock, no anger, no fear, just clarity. I picked up my napkin, adjusted it on my lap, and waited. Timing mattered. Moments later, Claire turned toward the kitchen. "I forgot the dressing," she said lightly. "I'll be right back." That was my window. I reached forward casually as if adjusting the placement of the glasses on the table and switched mine with hers in one fluid movement. No hesitation, no second guessing. Then I leaned back, my posture, relaxed, my expression calm. When Claire returned, she didn't notice. Why would she? In her mind, everything was still under her control. We began eating. The conversation was light, surface-level topics, nothing meaningful. Claire asked Ethan about work. Ethan gave distracted answers. I nodded occasionally, adding small comments when appropriate. And all the while, I watched. Claire took a sip of her water, then another. Not much at first, just enough. Enough. 20 minutes passed, then 25. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, I saw it begin. Claire's posture shifted, just slightly. Her shoulders relaxed, not in comfort, but in a way that suggested her body was losing its usual tension. She blinked more slowly. Her responses became delayed. "Claire," Ethan said, glancing at her. "You okay?" She smiled, but it wasn't as sharp as before. Of course, she said, her voice just a fraction softer. "Why wouldn't I be?" I kept my eyes on my plate, but my attention was entirely on her. This was what she had been doing to me. This slow unraveling. This subtle disconnection from clarity. I recognized it instantly, because I had felt it. Claire reached for her glass again, taking another sip, unaware that each swallow was working against her. A few minutes later, she set her fork down. "I just feel a little off," she said, pressing her fingers lightly to her temple. Ethan frowned. "Off how? I don't know," she replied, her words beginning to blur together slightly. "Just tired, I guess. Tired." That word again. The same one he had used just days before. The same one I had used to explain away what I couldn't yet understand. I felt a quiet, cold satisfaction settle in my chest, not because I enjoyed seeing her like this, but because I finally knew I wasn't imagining it. "You've been working hard," I said, gently lifting my eyes to meet hers. "Maybe you should rest." For a brief moment, something flickered in her expression. Confusion, then suspicion. Her gaze shifted to my glass, then to hers, and just for a second, the mask slipped. It was subtle, but I saw it. A crack, tiny but undeniable. She straightened slightly, as if trying to regain control. "I'm fine," she said quickly. "Just a little lightheaded." Ethan pushed his chair back slightly. "Maybe you should lie down." "No," she insisted, though her voice wavered. "I'm okay. I just need—" She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes unfocused. Just for a second, then she blinked rapidly as if trying to pull herself back. My pulse remained steady, but my mind was sharp. Observing, recording, confirming. Claire reached for the edge of the table, steadying herself. "That's strange," she murmured. "Yes," I said softly. It was the first time I had spoken directly into the moment. Her eyes snapped toward me, and for a fraction of a second, I let her see it. Not everything, not the full truth, just enough, a calmness, a knowing, a quiet shift in power. Then I smiled, the same way she always did, polite, composed, controlled. Ethan looked between us, confusion deepening. "What's going on?" he asked. Claire opened her mouth to respond but hesitated, because for the first time, she didn't know what to say. She didn't know what had happened. She didn't understand why she was the one sitting there struggling to stay focused, and that uncertainty, that loss of control, was something she had never planned for. I think I said, gently folding my napkin and placing it beside my plate, "We're all just a little tired tonight." Claire stared at me, really stared, as if trying to read something beneath the surface, but I gave her nothing more. No accusation, no explanation, just calm, steady calm. Ethan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, maybe we all need an early night." Claire nodded slowly, but her eyes never left mine. Not for a second, because somewhere deep down, she knew. Not everything, not yet, but enough to feel it. The shift, the change, the moment where the balance had tilted just slightly in a direction she hadn't anticipated. And as we cleared the table together, moving through the motions of normalcy, I understood something with absolute certainty. This was no longer just her game. It was mine now. And unlike her, I had no intention of losing. There is a moment in every carefully constructed lie when the truth begins to leak through. Not in a dramatic confession, not in a sudden collapse, but in the small fractures, the slips in tone, the hesitation before a word, the way someone says too much when they're trying too hard to say nothing at all. That night, Claire came closer to that moment than she realized. After dinner, Ethan insisted she lie down. "You don't look good," he said, guiding her toward the hallway. "Just rest for a bit." "I said I'm fine," Claire replied, though the edge in her voice was dulled, now softened by whatever was working its way through her system. Still, she let him lead her. That alone told me everything. Claire Whitmore was not the kind of woman who let anyone take control, not even her husband, and yet now, she didn't resist. I followed them at a distance, not intruding, just observing, always observing. Ethan helped her onto the bed in the guest room, ironically the same room I had been staying in before she decided it would be more comfortable for me to move to the smaller room down the hall. Another adjustment I hadn't questioned at the time, another piece of the pattern. "I'll get you some water," Ethan said. Claire grabbed his wrist weakly. "No," she murmured. "I just need a minute." Her voice was slower now, less precise. Ethan looked worried, genuinely so. "I'm calling someone if this doesn't pass," he said. "This isn't normal." I almost smiled at that. "No, Ethan, it isn't normal, but it is familiar." He stepped out briefly, probably to grab his phone, leaving Claire alone in the room. I stood just outside the doorway, out of sight but close enough to hear. And then, it happened. Claire exhaled sharply, her composure slipping further. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered under her breath. Her words were no longer carefully chosen. They were spilling, unfiltered, unprotected. It should have been gradual, she whispered, her voice uneven. "Not like this." My heart didn't race. It slowed, focused, because those weren't the words of someone confused. Those were the words of someone whose plan wasn't unfolding the way she expected. I leaned slightly closer, just enough to catch every word. "I measured it," she continued softly. "I always do. Measured. Always." There it was. Confirmation not just of intent, but of method. This wasn't random, this wasn't reckless. This was calculated, a system, a process she had repeated more than once. Claire shifted on the bed, her voice dropping lower. She was supposed to... Not me. The sentence trailed off, but it didn't need to be finished. I had heard enough. More than enough. Footsteps approached from down the hall. I stepped back immediately, just as Ethan re-entered the room. Claire closed her eyes quickly, as if retreating behind a shield. "Hey," Ethan said softly, sitting beside her. "You okay?" She nodded faintly. "Just tired," she murmured again. "Always tired." The word felt different now, heavy with meaning. Ethan brushed a hand through his hair, clearly unsettled. "I don't like this," he said. "You were fine earlier." Claire forced a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I probably just need rest," she said. "It's been a long week." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, I'll stay with you for a bit." I moved away quietly, giving them space, but not because I wanted to, because I needed time to think, to process what I had just heard. I returned to the living room and sat down slowly, my hands resting calmly in my lap. Inside, my mind was moving quickly, measured, precise. She was supposed to, not me. Those words echoed again and again. Claire hadn't just been giving me something, she'd been controlling the dosage, adjusting it, expecting a specific outcome, gradual. That was the word she used. Gradual decline, gradual confusion, gradual loss of clarity, enough to make it believable, enough to make it undeniable. And if I hadn't noticed, if I hadn't trusted my instincts, if I hadn't swapped that glass, then what? The answer formed slowly. Too slowly. Because part of me didn't want to face it, but I forced myself to. She wasn't trying to make me sick, not in a way that would raise alarms. She was trying to make me appear incapable, unstable, unreliable, a woman whose memory could no longer be trusted, a woman who needed help, supervision, control. My chest tightened not with fear, but with something colder, betrayal, not just from her, but from the situation, from the realization that I had walked willingly into something I didn't understand. And worse, that my own son might be standing beside her in it, not out of malice, but out of belief. That was the most dangerous kind of betrayal, the kind that wears the face of concern. I sat there for a long time listening to the quiet sounds of the house, the soft murmur of voices from the bedroom, the occasional creak of the floor, everything outwardly normal, everything inwardly changed. Eventually, Ethan came back into the living room. He looked tired, worried. "How is she?" I asked gently. He rubbed his face. "She's resting. Says she feels better." I nodded. "Good," I said. He hesitated, then sat across from me. There was something in his expression, something uncertain. "I don't know what that was," he admitted. "It just came out of nowhere." I met his gaze steadily. "Sometimes things don't come out of nowhere," I said quietly. He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" I held his eyes for a moment longer, then looked away. "Just that it's worth paying attention when something feels off," I said. He studied me. For a second, I thought he might ask more. Push further. But he didn't. Instead, he leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Yeah," he said, maybe. That was as far as he was willing to go for now. And that told me something important. Ethan wasn't ready to question Claire, not yet, which meant I couldn't rely on him. Not until I had something undeniable, something he couldn't explain away, something that would force him to see what I already knew. I stood up slowly. "I'm going to turn in," I said. "Yeah," he replied. "Get some rest. The word lingered between us. I walked down the hallway past the closed door where Claire lay and into my room, but I didn't lie down. Instead, I stood by the window, looking out into the dark, my reflection faint in the glass. And for the first time since this began, I allowed myself to feel it fully. Not fear, not confusion, but resolve. Because now I knew two things with absolute certainty. Claire had a plan, and she had already set it in motion. But she had made one mistake. Just one. She had assumed I wouldn't notice. She had assumed I would trust. She had assumed I would be easy to control. And that assumption was about to cost her everything. Once I understood the game, I stopped reacting like a mother and started thinking like a professional, because emotions, no matter how justified, would only get in my way. What I needed now wasn't confrontation. It was evidence. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Old habits, but this time I didn't go downstairs right away. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed and reviewed everything I knew. Every pattern, every slip, every moment Claire's control had revealed itself. She was drugging me, carefully, gradually, not to harm me outright, but to create symptoms. Symptoms that could be documented, symptoms that could be used. Which meant there had to be more than just the pills. There had to be a plan, paperwork, records, something official. Because no one goes to this level of precision without an end goal. I stood up slowly already, feeling the shift inside me. Calmer, sharper, more focused than I had been in weeks. Today I would begin, not as a victim, but as an observer, a collector of truth. When I came downstairs, Claire was already in the kitchen. Of course she was. Hair perfect, outfit flawless, expression composed, as if nothing had happened the night before. "Good morning," she said warmly. "How did you sleep?" "Very well," I replied, returning her smile. And for the first time, I meant something entirely different than what I said. I made breakfast, she added, gesturing to the plate already waiting for me. Egg whites, toast, coffee, everything arranged with that same careful precision. I walked over and sat down, but this time I didn't eat right away. Instead, I picked up my coffee and pretended to sip it, just enough to make it look natural. Then I set it down. Claire watched me. Not obviously, but I felt it. I added a little something to help with energy, she said casually. There it was, not even hidden. I smiled. That's thoughtful, I said, but I didn't drink it. Not really. I spent the rest of the meal moving food around my plate, taking small bites, keeping up the appearance of normalcy. And Claire seemed satisfied. That was important, because the more she believed her plan was working, the more she would continue, and the more she continued, the more I could learn. After breakfast, I waited, watched, and once Claire stepped out to take a call on the patio, I moved. Quickly, quietly, directly to the trash. Years of nursing had taught me that what people throw away often tells the truth they try to hide. I opened the lid slowly, careful not to make a sound. Inside, paper towels, food scraps, and then there, a small empty blister pack. I recognized the shape immediately. Sedatives. Mild but effective in controlled doses. I didn't touch it. Instead, I leaned closer, reading what little labeling remained. The name wasn't fully visible, but I didn't need the full name. I already knew enough. I closed the trash gently and stepped away just as Claire re-entered the house. Timing mattered. Always. "What are you up to?" she asked lightly. "Just stretching my legs," I said. "Thought I might take a walk later." Her expression shifted just slightly. "A walk," she repeated. "Yes," I said calmly. "The neighborhood seems nice." She hesitated, then smiled. "Of course," she said. "Just let me know. I can go with you." "I'll be fine," I replied. Another pause, then a nod. "All right," but I saw it again. That flicker, that need for control, and that told me something else. She didn't want me moving freely, not without supervision, not without knowing where I was or what I might see. Good. That meant I was already stepping outside the boundaries she had set, and that meant she would have to adjust, which meant more opportunities. Later that afternoon, I found another one. Claire had stepped out briefly, errands, she said. Ethan was at work. The house was quiet, empty, perfect. I moved through it slowly, deliberately not rushing. The key to searching a space isn't speed, it's precision. You don't look everywhere. You look where someone thinks you won't. I started in the kitchen. Cabinets, drawers, nothing unusual. Then the living room, clean, organized, too perfect. Nothing there. Which left the office. Claire's office. A room she kept closed most of the time. Not locked, just closed, as if the boundary itself was enough. I stood outside the door for a moment listening. Silence. Then I opened it. The room smelled faintly of paper and something sharper cleaning solution maybe. Everything inside was neat, files stacked, desk clear, computer closed, too clean. That was always the sign. Real work leaves traces. This was curated. I moved to the desk first, opened the top drawer, pens, notebooks, nothing important, second drawer, more of the same. Then the bottom drawer, locked. Of course it was. I straightened slowly, my mind already adjusting. If she locked it, it mattered. I didn't force it, didn't need to. Instead, I looked around. Closet, shelves, and then a small filing cabinet against the far wall. Unlocked. I approached it carefully and opened the top drawer. Medical articles, printed research, highlighted sections about aging memory, decline, cognitive impairment. My chest tightened slightly, not from fear, from confirmation. I flipped through them slowly. Notes in the margins, Claire's handwriting, detailed, methodical. This wasn't casual reading. This was study, preparation. The second drawer. That's where I found it. Documents, legal forms, structured, organized, intentional. I pulled one out carefully. Power of attorney. My name. Aurora Whitmore. My vision narrowed slightly as I read further. Designated authority. Claire Whitmore. My fingers tightened around the paper. There were more. Assisted living facility brochures, evaluation forms, checklists, all aligned around one idea, one outcome, to prove that I could no longer care for myself. And then I saw it. A signature. Not mine, Ethan's. Already there, already committed. For a moment the room felt very still. Too still, because that changed everything. This wasn't just Claire's plan. It was something Ethan had agreed to. Maybe not fully understanding, maybe believing it was necessary. But still, he had signed. He had taken a step. Against me. I placed the documents back exactly as I found them. Carefully, precisely. No trace. No disturbance. Then I closed the drawer and stepped back. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. But something inside me had shifted again. Deeper this time. More final, because now I knew the full shape of it. The pills, the symptoms, the documentation, the legal groundwork. It all led to one place. Control. Of my life. Of my decisions. Of everything I had built. And they thought I wouldn't see it. Wouldn't understand it. Wouldn't fight it. I stepped out of the office and closed the door quietly behind me. The house was still silent. Still perfect. Still pretending to be something it wasn't. But I wasn't pretending anymore. I had seen enough, and now I was ready to go further. There are moments in life when everything you suspect becomes undeniable. Not through instinct, not through observation, but through proof so clear, so deliberate, that there is no longer any room left for doubt. For me, that moment came in a quiet room standing in front of a filing cabinet that wasn't meant for my eyes. After what I had seen in Claire's office, I didn't return to the living room right away. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, my hand still resting lightly on the doorknob, my mind moving through everything piece by piece. The pills, the symptoms, the notes, the legal forms. It wasn't random, it wasn't impulsive, it was structured. A system designed to build a narrative, and now I knew what that narrative was. Aurora Whitmore is declining. Aurora Whitmore is confused. Aurora Whitmore is no longer capable of managing her own life. And once that narrative existed on paper, supported by evidence, reinforced by observation, it could be used, legally, permanently. I walked back into the living room slowly, my expression calm, my movement steady. The house was still empty, but it no longer felt quiet. It felt watched. Not in a physical sense, but in the way a stage feels when the performance has already begun. Everything placed, everything prepared, and I had been the only one who didn't know my role, until now. I sat down and exhaled slowly, allowing myself one moment, just one, to feel what I had been holding back. Betrayal. Not just from Claire, but from Ethan. Because his name, his signature, wasn't an accident. It wasn't forged. It wasn't a misunderstanding. He had signed those documents, which meant he had agreed, at least in part, to the idea that I was no longer capable, that I needed someone else to take control. And even if he believed it was for my benefit, it didn't change what it was. A step toward taking my autonomy, a step toward erasing me. I closed my eyes briefly, remembering the boy he used to be, the way he would hold my hand crossing the street, the way he used to say, "I've got you, Mom," when I was tired after long shifts, and now he had handed that responsibility to someone else, to Claire, the same woman who had been slowly drugging me. I opened my eyes. No tears came. Not anymore. Because grief, when it settles deep enough, becomes something else, something quieter, colder, clearer. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water myself for once. That small act felt significant, reclaiming something simple. Something mine. As I drank, I thought through my next steps. Confrontation was not an option. Not yet. If I accused them now without undeniable proof, Claire would adapt. She would shift tactics, deny everything, and Ethan, already leaning toward her version of reality, would believe her. No. What I needed was certainty. Evidence that couldn't be explained away. Something that would force the truth into the open, no matter how much they wanted to avoid it. And for that, I needed more than documents. I needed understanding, complete understanding, of how far they were willing to go. Later that evening, when Claire returned home, she was exactly as she had been before. Composed, controlled, perfect. "Did you have a good afternoon?" she asked, setting her bag down neatly by the door. "Very peaceful," I replied, and again I meant something entirely different than what I said. She studied me for a moment, just a moment, as if checking, measuring, then she smiled. "I'm glad," she said. Dinner was prepared as usual, served as usual, watched as usual. But now everything felt different, because I understood what every action meant, every plate, every glass, every helpful gesture. It was all part of the same design. I didn't drink what she gave me. Not really. I made it look like I did. I played the part she expected, because now I was inside the performance, not outside it. Ethan joined us shortly after loosening his tie, looking tired. "Hey," he said, kissing Claire lightly on the cheek. Then he looked at me. "How was your day, Mom?" "Quiet," I said. "I did some reading." He nodded, distracted. But there was something else there, something unsettled. Maybe from the night before, maybe from Claire's strange behavior, or maybe from something deeper he hadn't yet allowed himself to face. We ate in relative silence, until Claire spoke. "I've been thinking," she said, setting her fork down carefully. "It might be a good idea to schedule a general evaluation." Ethan looked up. "For what? For Aurora," she said gently. "Just to be safe." There it was, out in the open. No longer hidden behind subtle comments or careful suggestions. Now it had shape, direction, purpose. "I'm fine," I said calmly. "Of course," Claire replied immediately. "This isn't about something being wrong. It's about being proactive." Proactive, another one of her words. Words designed to sound reasonable, responsible, unquestionable. Ethan hesitated. He said slowly, "it wouldn't hurt, right? Just to check everything." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment, I saw it. The conflict, small, faint, but there. He wasn't entirely certain, not yet, but he was leaning toward her. "I've spent my entire career evaluating others," I said quietly. "I know my own mind." Claire smiled, but it was tighter now. "Sometimes," she said gently, "it's harder to see changes in ourselves." I held her gaze, unblinking, and sometimes I replied just as softly people see what they want to see. The air between us shifted, just slightly. Ethan looked between us, uncomfortable. "Hey," he said, forcing a small laugh, "let's not turn this into a big thing. It's just a conversation, just a conversation." "No, Ethan, it was never just that," but I didn't say it. Instead, I picked up my glass and set it back down without drinking. "I'm not opposed to a checkup," I said finally, "but I'll schedule it myself." Claire's eyes flickered, just briefly. "That's not necessary," she said. "I can handle it. I'm sure you can," I replied, "but I'd prefer to take care of my own appointments." Silence. "Then of course," she said, but her tone had changed. Subtle, controlled, but no longer entirely smooth, because for the first time, I had pushed back. Not openly, not aggressively, but enough to disrupt the flow she had been building. Enough to show her I wasn't as compliant as she thought. And as we finished dinner, moving through the motions of normalcy, once again, I realized something important. Claire had already set her plan in motion, the documents, the narrative, the groundwork, but she wasn't finished. Not yet. She was still building, still shaping, still preparing for the moment when everything would come together. And that meant I still had time. Time to gather more, time to prepare, time to turn everything she had built against her. Because now I knew exactly what she wanted, and I had no intention of letting her have it. The hardest part of betrayal isn't what's done to you. It's realizing that someone you love believes it's justified. After what I found in Claire's office, I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. I had to understand Ethan's role, not what I hoped it was, not what I feared it might be, but what it actually was. Because without that clarity, I wouldn't know how to move forward, and moving forward blindly was no longer an option. The opportunity came 2 days later. Claire had an appointment in the city, something work-related, she said, and would be gone most of the afternoon. Ethan was working from home. That alone was unusual. He usually preferred the office, but that day he stayed. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. Either way, it gave me something I hadn't had in a while. Time alone with my son. I found him in the living room laptop, open papers spread across the coffee table. His tie was loosened, sleeves rolled up, half in work mode, half distracted. "Busy day?" I asked, stepping into the room. He glanced up and smiled faintly. "Always," he said. "You know how it is." "I do," I replied, taking a seat across from him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't easy either. It was the kind of silence that carries things beneath it. Unsaid things, unasked questions. Finally, I broke it. "Ethan," I said gently, "can I ask you something?" He hesitated just slightly. Of course. I studied him for a moment, choosing my words carefully. I've noticed Claire has been very involved in my routine, I said. My meals, my schedule, even my appointments. He shifted in his seat. Yeah, he said, she's just trying to help. There it was. The same answer. The same safe explanation. I understand that, I said calmly. But I'm curious, has she talked to you about why she feels that's necessary? He exhaled slowly, closing his laptop halfway. Mom, he began, then stopped. That hesitation told me everything. He knew, at least partially. I'm not accusing anyone, I said softly. I just want to understand. He ran a hand through his hair, looking away. It's not like that, he said finally. We're just concerned. Concerned. The word landed heavily. About what I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back, staring at the ceiling for a moment as if searching for the right way to say it. You've seemed different, he said at last. Different, how forgetful, he replied. Tired. Sometimes you lose track of things mid-conversation. You've left the stove on twice. You've asked me the same question more than once in a day. I listened without interrupting, because what he was describing had happened, but not for the reasons he believed. I see, I said quietly. He leaned forward again, his voice softer now. I didn't want to say anything at first, he admitted, but Claire noticed it too, and she's been keeping track, just in case. Keeping track. Of course she had. That's why you've been letting her manage things, I said. He nodded. Yeah, he said, it just felt safer. Safer. For who I asked, gently. He frowned slightly. For you, he said, for everyone. I held his gaze. And the documents, I asked. His expression froze. There it was. The moment. The shift from uncertainty to awareness. What documents, he asked carefully. I didn't look away. The power of attorney forms, I said. The assisted living information, the evaluations. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Unavoidable. Ethan's eyes flickered just for a second. Then he looked down. I didn't think you'd find those, he said quietly. Honesty. Not full, but enough. That's not an answer, I said. He exhaled sharply, leaning forward, elbows resting on his knees. It's not what you think he said. It rarely is, I replied. So tell me what it is. He hesitated again. Longer this time. Then we were just preparing, he said. Preparing. For what I asked. In case things get worse, he said quickly. In case you need help making decisions. It's not about taking anything from you. It's about protecting you. Protecting me. The word felt almost cruel now. By taking control of my legal authority, I asked. His jaw tightened. It's not like that, he said. It would only happen if I'm declared incapable, I finished. He didn't answer, because he didn't need to. We both knew. And you signed, I said? It wasn't a question. He closed his eyes briefly. Claire said it was just a precaution, he said, that it didn't mean anything unless we needed it. I repeated softly. He flinched slightly. He started, then stopped. I let the silence stretch. Not to punish him, but to give him space to hear himself. To you, I said finally, does it feel like I'm incapable? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment, I saw it. Doubt, small, fragile, but real, I don't know, he said quietly. That hurt more than anything else, not anger, not accusation, uncertainty, because uncertainty can be shaped, influenced, guided, and Claire had been guiding him. I raised you to trust your judgment, I said, not just follow someone else's. I'm not just following her, he said a little defensively. Aren't you? I asked. He opened his mouth to respond, then stopped, because somewhere deep down, he wasn't sure anymore. I'm trying to do what's right, he said finally. I believe that, I said, and I did. That was the tragedy of it. Ethan wasn't cruel. He wasn't malicious. He was convinced, and that made him dangerous, because he didn't see himself as part of the problem. He saw himself as part of the solution. I don't want to lose you, he said suddenly, his voice quieter now. The words caught me off guard. You're not losing me, I replied. But what if you're changing, he asked. What if something is happening and we ignore it? I leaned back slightly, studying him. What if something is happening? I said slowly, but not in the way you think. He frowned. What does that mean? I held his gaze for a long moment, then shook my head slightly. Nothing I said, not yet, because he wasn't ready, not for the truth, not without proof. And if I told him now without evidence, he couldn't deny Claire would twist it, redirect it, Make it seem like confirmation of everything she had been suggesting. Paranoia, confusion, instability. No, I needed more. Something undeniable. Something that would force him to see. I appreciate you talking to me, I said, standing slowly. Mom, he started. I'm fine, I said gently, and I will continue to be fine. He looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. Instead, he nodded. And I walked away. Not because I was done, but because I understood something now with absolute clarity. Ethan wasn't fully lost. Not yet, but he was standing on the edge, and if I didn't act carefully, Claire would push him the rest of the way. So I would give him what he needed. Not words, not arguments, but truth. Clear, undeniable, impossible to ignore, and when that moment came, he would have to choose. Once I understood Ethan's position, everything became clearer. Not easier, but clearer. He wasn't my enemy, but he wasn't my ally either. He was standing in the middle, leaning toward Claire, guided by what he believed to be concern reinforced by what he thought were facts, which meant one thing. If I wanted him to see the truth, I had to show it to him in a way he couldn't explain away, and that meant I needed confirmation. Not suspicion, not patterns, but facts. The kind that don't bend under pressure. The kind that don't disappear when questioned. The kind that stand on their own. That's why I went to see Samuel. Dr. Samuel Harris, a man I had trusted for over 30 years. We had worked together in the same hospital for nearly a decade back when I was still on my feet for 12 hours a day, managing patients, reading charts, making decisions that mattered. Samuel was the kind of doctor who didn't rush, didn't guess, didn't assume, which was exactly what I needed now. I didn't tell Claire where I was going. I simply said I had an errand. She didn't like that. I could see it in the way her smile tightened just slightly. Do you want me to come with you, she asked. I'll be fine, I said. The same answer I had given before, the same quiet resistance. And again, that flicker. But this time she didn't push. All right, she said. Just let me know if you need anything. Need. Such a simple word. And yet everything she had done revolved around making me appear as though I needed more than I did. I left before she could say anything else. The drive to Samuel's clinic felt longer than it actually was, not because of distance, but because of what it meant. This was the line, the point where suspicion would either become truth or fall apart completely. I parked outside the building and sat there for a moment, my hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. Steady, calm, but aware. Because once I walked inside, there would be no going back to uncertainty. Samuel greeted me himself. He hadn't changed much, older of course, a few more lines on his face, a little slower in his movements, but his eyes were the same, sharp, observant. Aurora, he said, smiling warmly. It's been too long. It has. I replied, returning the smile, but he saw it immediately. Something was off. It always amazed me how quickly he could read people. What's going on? He asked, his tone shifting. No small talk, no delay, straight to the point. I need your help, I said. He gestured toward his office. Come in. Once inside, I didn't sit right away. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out what I had collected, a small plastic container, inside fragments of pills, carefully saved over the past few days. Not obvious, not enough to raise suspicion, but enough for someone like Samuel to examine. He looked at the container, then at me. Where did you get these? He asked. From my own meals, I said. That was all it took. His expression changed, not dramatically, but enough for me to know he understood the seriousness of what I was saying. Explain, he said. So I did. Everything. The fatigue, the memory lapses, the patterns, the glass, the swap, the documents. I didn't rush, didn't exaggerate. Just facts, clear, precise. By the time I finished, the room felt different. He leaned back slightly, his hands folded together, his eyes focused. You're certain these weren't prescribed to you, he asked. Absolutely, I said. I haven't been on any medication. He nodded slowly. And no other possible source. Numbo, silence. Then he reached for the container. I'll need to run tests, he said. This won't take long. I nodded. I'll wait. The next 30 minutes felt like hours. Not because I was anxious, but because I was ready. Ready for whatever came next. When Samuel returned, his expression told me everything before he said a word. "This is a sedative," he said. I didn't react, not outwardly. But inside, everything settled. Final, confirmed. "It's not particularly strong on its own," he continued, "but in repeated doses, it can cause exactly what you described." "Fatigue," I said. He nodded. "Cognitive dulling, slowed responses, memory issues, exactly. And if someone didn't know that they were taking it, I asked." He looked at me carefully. "They might believe something was wrong with them," he said, "especially over time." There it was. Not just confirmation of the substance, but confirmation of the intent. Because this wasn't about immediate harm. It was about perception. Creating symptoms, shaping a narrative, making something appear real. That wasn't. "Could it be used to simulate cognitive decline?" I asked. His eyes sharpened. "Yes," he said, "very effectively." I exhaled slowly, not in relief, but in clarity. Because now, there was no doubt left, no question, no uncertainty. Claire hadn't just been manipulating my routine, she had been systematically altering how I appeared to others, including my own son. And if this were documented, I asked. Observed over time, he understood immediately. It could support a claim of incapacity, he said. Exactly. The room felt very still, very quiet, but not heavy. Not anymore, because uncertainty is heavy. Truth is not. Truth is sharp, clean, final. "What do you want to do?" Samuel asked. I met his gaze, and for the first time since this began, I allowed myself to feel it fully. Not fear, not anger, but purpose. "I want proof," I said. "You have proof," he replied. I shook my head slightly. "I have confirmation," I said, "but I need something more." He waited, understanding. "I need something they can't deny," I continued. "Something that forces the truth into the open." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Then you'll need to document it," he said, carefully, clearly, and without tipping them off. "I know," I said, because that was the part I understood best. Observation, timing, precision, all the things I had spent my life doing. Just now, the patient was my own life. Samuel placed the container back on the table. "I'll run a full report," he said. "You'll have documentation of exactly what this is and what it does." "That's what I need," I said. He hesitated for a moment, then added Aurora. "Be careful." I smiled faintly. "I've been careful my entire life," I said, "but this time, careful meant something different, because now I wasn't just protecting myself. I was preparing, building, setting the stage for something Claire hadn't anticipated, because she thought she was the only one planning, the only one controlling the narrative, the only one shaping the outcome. But she was wrong, and soon, she was going to find out just how wrong she was. Once you have the truth, the question isn't whether you'll act, it's how. Because acting too soon can destroy everything, and acting too late can do the same. I left Samuel's clinic with more than confirmation. I left with direction. A report would be ready soon, clear, clinical, undeniable. But even that wouldn't be enough on its own. Claire would deny it. She would twist it. She would claim misunderstanding, accident, anything that allowed her to keep control of the narrative. No, what I needed wasn't just proof of what she was doing. I needed proof of intent, and for that, I needed her to expose herself. When I returned home, everything looked exactly the same. The same clean counters, the same polished surfaces, same illusion of order. Claire was in the kitchen as expected. "Back already?" she asked, glancing up. "Yes," I said, setting my bag down. "It didn't take long." "What kind of errand was it?" she asked casually. There it was. The question wrapped in ease, but sharpened by curiosity. "Just personal," I replied. Her smile held, but I could feel the shift. She didn't like not knowing. Good, that meant I was beginning to step outside her control. Over the next 2 days, I began laying the groundwork, quietly, carefully, deliberately. The first step was simple: observation. But this time I wasn't just observing for myself. I was documenting. I started keeping notes written in a small notebook I kept hidden in my bag. Times, meals, what Claire served, how she behaved, every small detail. Because details matter. Details build patterns, and patterns become evidence. The second step was more delicate. Recording. I didn't need anything elaborate, just enough. A small device. Easy to conceal. Easy to activate. And most importantly, easy to forget. Because people are always most honest when they believe no one is listening. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. One afternoon, Claire and I were alone in the house. Ethan was at work. The air felt quiet, controlled, predictable, which meant it was the perfect moment to disrupt it. "I've been feeling a little off lately," I said, casually, sitting at the kitchen table. Claire looked up immediately. Concern perfectly performed. Off how she asked. "Just tired," I said. "A little forgetful." Her eyes sharpened. There it was. Interest, not concern. Interest. "Well," she said gently, "that's not uncommon." I know I replied, "but it's happening more often." I watched her closely. "I've noticed that too," she said carefully. "Of course you have." "You have?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. She nodded. "Just small things," she said, "nothing to worry about yet. But it's good to be aware. Aware, always guiding, always shaping." "What do you think I should do?" I asked. The question hung in the air, simple, innocent, and exactly what she had been waiting for. She sat down across from me, leaning in slightly, lowering her voice. "Honestly," she said. "Yes," I replied. "I think it would be best if we started documenting things," she said, "just in case." Documenting, the same word Samuel had used. But from her, it meant something very different. And maybe, she continued, we should look into having someone evaluate you, just to establish a baseline. A baseline. I nodded slowly, as if considering it. "That makes sense," I said. Her shoulders relaxed, just slightly, because in her mind, I was beginning to agree, beginning to follow, beginning to step into the role she had created for me. "I can handle the arrangements," she added quickly. "I'm sure you can," I said. Then I paused. "Just long enough, but I'd feel better if we did it together," I added. A flicker. There it was again. She didn't like that. Control shared is control weakened. "Of course," she said, forcing a small smile. "Together." I nodded, then leaned back slightly. "And the medication?" I asked. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes did. "What medication?" she asked. There it was. The lie, smooth, immediate, expected. "I mean supplements," I said lightly. "You've been adding things to my drinks, right? Vitamins." She relaxed, just a little. "Yes," she said, "just mild supplements, nothing serious." "Of course," I replied. And all the while, the recorder sat quietly in my bag, capturing every word, every tone, every shift. That evening I took it further. At dinner, I created the same conditions as before. Same table, same setup, same routine. But this time, I didn't switch the glasses. Not immediately. Instead, I waited, watched. And when Claire leaned slightly toward my glass, I spoke. "You've been taking very good care of me," I said. She smiled. "I try. And you're very precise," I added. Her hand paused. "Just slightly. I like things to be done properly," she said. Even with the amounts I asked, there it was. A test, subtle, but pointed. She hesitated. "Just for a second. Of course," she said. "That's important." I nodded slowly, then reached for my glass and stopped, mid-motion. "I trust you, Sue," I said. 3 words. Simple, powerful, dangerous. Because trust invites honesty. And also, arrogance. Claire's expression softened. "Just slightly, I know," she said, and in that moment, she believed it. She believed I was still unaware, still dependent, still within her control, which meant she would continue, she would act, she would reveal more, and I would be there, watching, recording, waiting. Because now, I wasn't just reacting to her plan. I was guiding it, shaping it, leading her exactly where I needed her to go, toward exposure, toward truth, toward the moment where everything she had built would collapse. And this time, there would be no way for her to hide. There is a kind of silence that comes before the truth breaks open. Not peaceful, not calm, but deliberate. The kind of silence you create when you already know exactly what is about to happen. That was the silence I carried with me the night I invited them both to dinner. Not Claire's dinner, mine. For the first time since I had moved into that house, I took control. I thought I'd cook tonight. I said that afternoon, standing in the kitchen as Claire organized her usual routine. She looked up immediately, surprised. Then, cautious. "You don't have to do that," she said lightly. "I already planned something." I know I replied, smiling, "But I'd like to." A pause, small but telling, because this wasn't just about cooking, this was about control, and she felt it. "I just think it might be a little much," she added gently. "You've seemed tired lately." There it was, the narrative. still being reinforced. "I feel perfectly fine today," I said calmly. "In fact, better than I have in a while." Our eyes met, and for a moment, neither of us looked away. Then she smiled. "All right," she said, "if you're sure, I am. Ethan came home shortly after." "Something smells amazing," he said, stepping into the kitchen. "It's been a while since I cooked for you," I replied. He smiled faintly. "Yeah," he said, "it has." There was something in his tone. Nostalgia. Maybe even a hint of uncertainty, because for the first time in weeks, things felt like they used to. And that mattered. Dinner was set differently that night. Not perfectly arranged, not controlled, but real, simple, familiar. I watched Claire as we sat down. She was still composed, still careful, but there was tension beneath it now. A subtle shift. Because she wasn't in charge of the environment anymore. I was. I wanted tonight to be just us, I said, folding my napkin gently. No stress, no concerns, just dinner. Ethan nodded. "That sounds good," he said. Claire smiled. "Of course." We began eating. The conversation started light, safe. Ethan talked about work. Claire added small comments. I listened, waited, because timing mattered. And then I chose my moment. "I went to see someone the other day," I said. Claire's fork paused. Ethan looked up. "Who?" he asked. "A former colleague," I said. "Dr. Samuel Harris." The name landed. Claire's expression didn't change, but something behind it did. Ethan frowned slightly. "Why?" he asked. I had some questions, I replied calmly. "About my health." Silence. Not long, but enough. "What kind of questions?" Claire asked, her voice carefully neutral. I reached into my bag, slowly, deliberately, and placed a folder on the table. "I brought something back," I said. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Claire didn't move. Not yet. I opened the folder. Inside the report, clear, clinical, undeniable. "What is this?" Ethan asked. "Answers," I said. I slid the paper toward him. He picked it up, started reading. His expression shifted almost immediately. Confusion, then concern, then something else, something heavier. "This says—" he began, then stopped. "Yes," I said quietly. "It does." Claire finally spoke. "What exactly are you trying to suggest?" she asked. I turned to her. Calm, steady. "I'm not suggesting anything," I said. "I'm showing you." Ethan looked between us. "Mom, what is this?" he asked. "It's a lab analysis," I replied, "of substances that have been entering my system." Claire let out a soft, almost amused breath. "That's ridiculous," she said. "You're misunderstanding something." "No," I said, and for the first time, my voice changed. Not louder, not sharper, but certain. "I'm not." Ethan's hands tightened slightly around the paper. "Sedatives," he said. "Repeated exposure?" "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, my eyes still on Claire, "that someone has been giving me something without my knowledge." The room went still, completely still. Claire leaned back slightly, her expression calm, too calm. "This is a serious accusation," she said. "I agree," I replied. Ethan looked at her, then at me, then back at the report. "This can't be right," he said. "Read it again," I said. He did, slower this time, more carefully, and I watched his face as the pieces began to shift. Not fully, not yet, but enough. Claire spoke again. "This proves nothing," she said. "There could be any explanation." "Yes," I said, "there could be." I reached into my bag again, and this time, I took out the recorder. Small, simple, silent, until now. I thought the same thing, I said. Then I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, clear, unmistakable. "This doesn't make sense. It should have been gradual. I measured it. She was supposed to— not me." Ethan froze, completely. Claire didn't move. Not at first. Then slowly, she stood. "That's taken out of context," she said. "Is it?" I asked. The recording continued. Every word, every slip, every moment she thought no one was listening. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. "What is this?" he asked. Claire shook her head. "It's not what it sounds like," she said. "It sounds exactly like what it is," I replied. Her eyes snapped to mine, and this time, there was no mask, no softness, no control, just something raw, something exposed. "You don't understand," she said. "Then explain it," I said. Silence. Because she couldn't. Not without telling the truth. And the truth would destroy everything she had built. Ethan stood slowly. "This is insane," he said, his voice unsteady. "Claire, what is she talking about?" Claire looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't have an answer ready. "I was trying to help," she said finally. There it was. the justification, the beginning of the collapse. By drugging me, I asked. I wasn't drugging you, she said quickly. It was a controlled amount. She stopped. Too late. The words had already left her mouth. Ethan's face changed. Not confusion anymore, not uncertainty, something else. Realization. What he said. Claire looked at him, and this time, she couldn't take it back. The silence that followed wasn't the same as before. This one wasn't controlled. It wasn't deliberate. It was the kind of silence that comes when everything finally falls apart. And I sat there, calm, still, watching it happen. Because this moment was exactly what I had been waiting for. There is no clean way for a lie to survive once it's been fully exposed. It doesn't collapse all at once. It fractures, breaks apart in pieces. And in those pieces, you see everything. That night I watched Claire's world begin to unravel, not in chaos, not in shouting, but in something far more revealing. Desperation. Ethan stood there, still holding the report, his eyes locked on her. You said, controlled amount, he repeated slowly. Claire's breathing had changed. Not visibly frantic, but uneven. Measured in a way that suggested she was trying to regain control of something that was already slipping. You're twisting my words, she said quickly. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you said, I replied. She ignored me. Of course she did. Her focus was on Ethan now. It always had been. Ethan, she said, stepping closer to him, softening her voice. Listen to me. This isn't what it looks like. What does it look like, Claire, he asked. There was no anger in his voice yet. Just disbelief. The kind that comes when reality doesn't match what you thought you knew. I was trying to help her, she said again. How, he asked. Another pause, because that question required a real answer. Not a polished one, not a rehearsed one, a real one. She's been declining, Claire said, her tone, shifting slightly less controlled, now more urgent. You've seen it. The forgetfulness, the confusion. I was trying to manage it before it got worse. By giving her something without telling her, Ethan pressed. It wasn't dangerous, she said quickly. It was mild, just enough to... She stopped again because now she heard herself, heard the logic unraveling as she tried to hold it together. Just enough to what I asked quietly. Claire turned to me, her composure cracking further. To stabilize things, she snapped, to keep it from getting out of control. By creating the symptoms you were trying to prove, I asked. Her eyes flashed. I wasn't creating anything, she said. I was managing what was already there. No, I said, and this time, I didn't soften it. You were manufacturing it. The word hung in the air. Manufacturing. Because that's what it was. Not care, not concern, production. Deliberate, measured, designed. Ethan looked between us, his face tightening. Claire, tell me the truth, he said. And there it was. The moment everything balanced on. Not between us, between them. Claire hesitated. And that hesitation said more than anything else. I did what I thought was necessary, she said finally. Ethan took a step back, as if the distance might help him understand what he was hearing. You drugged my mother, he said. I didn't drug her, Claire snapped. Stop using that word. It wasn't like that. What was it like, he demanded. She exhaled sharply, her control slipping further. It was controlled, she said. It was measured. I monitored everything. Why, he asked. And this time, she answered. Because she had to. Because she wasn't safe, Claire said. The room went still. Ethan stared at her. What he said, she was forgetting things. Claire continued, her voice rising slightly. Leaving things on. Losing track of conversations. It was only going to get worse. And if we didn't act early... You mean, if you didn't act early, I said. She turned on me. I was protecting this family, she said. From me, I asked. Yes, she said. No hesitation this time. No softness, just truth. Sharp, clear, ugly. Ethan's breath caught slightly. You think my mother is a threat, he asked. I think she's becoming unstable, Claire said. And your solution was to make her appear more unstable, I asked. It was to document it, she said, to make sure we had what we needed before it became a crisis. What we needed, Ethan repeated. She turned to him again. Ethan, listen to me, she said, stepping closer. This wasn't about hurting her. It was about planning ahead, about making sure we could make decisions if she couldn't. And you decided that already, he asked. No, she said quickly. I was preparing in case what, he pressed. In case she loses everything Claire said. her judgment, her memory, her ability to function. Ethan shook his head slowly. "You don't know that," he said. "I know the signs," she insisted. "No," I said quietly. "You created them." Claire's expression hardened. "You think this is about control," she said. "Yes," I replied. "It's not," she said. "Then what is it?" I asked. Silence. Because now there was nowhere left to hide, and when she finally spoke, the truth came out. Not carefully, not strategically, but raw. "I was trying to protect what we've built," she said. Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" he asked. Claire looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, there was no mask. "No one wants to say it," she said. "But if she declines, everything becomes complicated. Legally, financially, decisions get delayed, assets get tied up. I was trying to make sure we were in a position to manage it. There it was. The real reason. Not care, not concern. Control of assets, of decisions, of everything." Ethan's face changed. Not slowly, not subtly, completely. "You were thinking about money," he said. "I was thinking about reality," she snapped. "You weren't. Someone had to. And that someone was you," he asked. "Yes," she said. No hesitation, no apology, just certainty. Because in her mind, she was right. "I trusted you," Ethan said. "I did this for us," she replied. "No," he said, "and this time, there was no doubt you did this for you." The words landed hard, because they were true. Claire stepped back slightly, not in defeat, but in realization, because she could see it now, the shift. Not between her and me, but between her and Ethan, and that was something she hadn't planned for. "I didn't think you'd react like this," she said. Ethan let out a short, humorless breath. "No," he said. "You didn't think I'd find out." Silence. Heavy. Final. And in that silence, everything changed. Claire looked at me one last time, not with anger, not even with resentment, but with something else. Recognition. Because now, she understood. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate, and she had lost control of it. Ethan turned away from her, then back to me. His eyes were different now, clear, focused, and filled with something I hadn't seen in weeks. "Truth. I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't respond. Not yet. Because apologies don't undo actions. And this moment, it wasn't about forgiveness. It was about clarity. And clarity had finally arrived. There is a point after the truth comes out when everything feels strangely quiet. Not peaceful, not resolved. Just still. As if the storm has passed, but the damage hasn't been fully seen yet. That was the silence that settled over the house in the days that followed. Claire stopped speaking to me. Not openly, at least. She moved through the house like a shadow of herself, still composed, still careful, but colder now, distant, calculating in a different way, not planning anymore, recovering. Ethan, on the other hand, changed completely. He didn't try to defend her again. He didn't try to explain things away, but he didn't know what to do either. And that uncertainty lingered between us. "I should have seen it," he said one morning, standing in the kitchen, his voice low. I was pouring my own coffee, a small act, but one I no longer took for granted. "You saw what you were shown," I replied. "That's not an excuse," he said. "No," I agreed. "It isn't." He looked at me then, really looked. "I trusted her," he said. "And you stopped trusting yourself," I said. He didn't argue, because he knew it was true. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he added. "I know I said, and I did." That was the part that made it complicated. If Ethan had been cruel, it would have been easier. If he had been indifferent, it would have been simpler. But he wasn't. He was misled. And that doesn't erase what happened. It just changes how you carry it. "What happens now?" he asked. There it was. The question. The one that mattered. I set my cup down slowly. Now I said I take back control of my life. He nodded, as if he expected that, as if he knew it was coming. "I'll help you," he said quickly. "Whatever you need." I met his eyes. "No," I said gently. He blinked. "What I'm not asking for help," I replied. The words weren't harsh, but they were firm. Because this was something I needed to do on my own. Not out of pride, but out of necessity. Because independence, once threatened, becomes something you protect more fiercely than anything else. "I need to know I can stand on my own," I said, without anyone controlling the ground beneath me. He swallowed, then nodded. "I understand," he said. I believed him, but understanding wasn't the same as repairing what had been broken. That afternoon, I met with Lisa Grant, an attorney who specialized in elder law, someone I had contacted quietly days earlier before the confrontation, because I had known this moment would come, and I had prepared for it. Lisa was direct, efficient, the kind of person who didn't waste time with unnecessary words. "I've reviewed what you sent," she said, sitting across from me in her office. "You have a strong position. I want everything secured," I said. "It will be," she replied. "But we need to move carefully." "I understand," she nodded. "First, we revoke any existing documents," she said. "Even if they weren't fully executed, we eliminate any ambiguity." "Good." "Second, we establish clear updated directives," she continued. "On your terms, with witnesses. Properly documented. Done. And third," she paused slightly, studying me, "we consider whether you want to pursue action against your daughter-in-law." There it was, the question. Legal, practical, necessary. I didn't answer immediately, because this wasn't just about law, it was about something deeper. "What would that involve?" I asked. "Potential charges related to administering substances without consent," she said. "At minimum, civil action. Possibly more." I nodded slowly. "Would it hold?" I asked. "With the evidence you have," she replied. Yes, I leaned back slightly, thinking, not about revenge, not about punishment, but about consequence, because actions when left without consequence tend to repeat. "I want everything documented," I said finally. "It will be, but I'm not interested in dragging this through court," I added. She raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said, "because this wasn't about destroying Claire. It was about protecting myself and ensuring she couldn't do this again. To me," I clarified, "or to anyone else." Lisa nodded. "That can be arranged," she said. "We can formalize everything, make it clear, legally binding, good." When I left her office, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not relief, but certainty. The kind that comes from knowing. You've taken back what was almost taken from you. That evening, I returned to the house, but it didn't feel the same anymore. Not because it had changed, but because I had. Claire was in the living room. Ethan wasn't home yet. She looked up as I entered. Our eyes met, and for a moment, everything that had happened sat between us, unspoken, but fully understood. "You went out," she said. "Yes," I replied. She nodded slightly. "Then what are you going to do?" she asked. There was no softness in her voice now, no pretense, just a direct question. "I've already started," I said. She held my gaze, and for the first time, there was something like respect in her eyes. Not admiration, not approval, but acknowledgement, because she knew I had matched her. Step for step, move for move, and now I was ahead. "You planned this," she said. "Yes," I replied. A small pause. "Then so did I," she said. "I know." Silence. "But this time, it wasn't tense. It was final." "I underestimated you," she added. "Yes," I said. She nodded once, as if accepting that, and for a brief moment we stood there, not as family, not as enemies, but as two people who had played a game and reached its end. Ethan came home shortly after. The three of us in the same space again, but nothing about it was the same. "I spoke to a lawyer," I said calmly. Ethan froze slightly. Claire didn't react. "I'm revoking any authority that was being prepared," I continued, "and I'll be moving out." The words were simple, clear, final. Ethan stepped forward. "Mom, I've made my decision," I said. He stopped, because he could hear it. This wasn't something to debate. It wasn't something to change. It was done. "I'm not cutting you out of my life," I added, "but things will be different." He nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. Claire said nothing. She didn't need to, because she already knew, and as I walked down the hallway to my room, I felt something settle inside me. Not anger, not sadness, but something stronger, control, not over others, but over myself, my choices, my life, and that was something no one would ever take from me again. Leaving that house didn't feel dramatic. There were no raised voices, no last-minute arguments, no one trying to stop me at the door. It was quiet, deliberate, final. I packed slowly over the next 2 days, not because I had much left to gather, but because I wanted to do it on my own terms. Every item I folded, every drawer I emptied, felt like reclaiming something that had almost been taken from me. Control doesn't always disappear all at once. Sometimes it's chipped away piece by piece until you don't recognize how much you've lost. And sometimes you don't realize how much you've taken back until you're standing in an empty room holding your own keys again. Ethan tried to help, Of course he did. Let me carry that, he said more than once. I've got it, I replied each time. Not cold, not dismissive, just firm. Because this wasn't about proving something to him, it was about proving something to myself. Claire stayed out of the way. She didn't offer help, didn't offer apologies, didn't offer anything at all, and strangely, I preferred it that way. Because apologies, when they come too late or without understanding, don't heal anything. They just fill silence. And I wasn't interested in silence anymore. The morning I left, the sky was clear, bright, uncomplicated. The kind of morning that doesn't reflect the weight of what's happened, but reminds you that something new is possible anyway. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking back at the house. Not with nostalgia, not with regret, but with clarity. Because now I could see it for what it had been. Not a home, a structure. A place where something had been built not for me, but around me. And now, I was stepping outside of it. Ethan stood beside me. Quiet, uncertain. I'll come visit, he said. I nodded. You're welcome to, I replied. A pause. Then I'm really sorry, he added. This time I didn't deflect it. I didn't ignore it. I let it sit. Because he needed to say it. And I needed to hear it. I know I said, not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement, and sometimes that's the first step. Claire remained inside. I didn't look for her, didn't need to, because whatever needed to be said between us already had been. I got into my car, closed the door, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not relief, not even peace, but space. The kind of space that allows you to breathe without thinking about it, the kind that reminds you belong to yourself. My new place wasn't large, it wasn't polished, it didn't look like something out of a magazine, but it was mine. Every inch of it. The furniture I chose, the kitchen I organized, the way the light came through the windows in the morning. Simple things, but real, and in that simplicity, I found something I hadn't realized I had lost. Trust. Not in others, but in myself. Days turned into weeks. And slowly the rhythm of my life returned. I cooked my own meals, drank my own coffee, went where I wanted, when I wanted. No one watching, no one adjusting, no one deciding what was best for me, just me. And that was enough. Ethan reached out, not constantly, not forcefully, but consistently. A message, a call, an invitation. Each one careful, respectful, as if he understood that rebuilding something broken doesn't happen all at once. It happens in pieces. And I responded, not immediately, not always, but when I was ready, because connection should never come from obligation, only from choice. The first time he visited, he stood awkwardly in the doorway looking around. This is nice, he said. It's peaceful, I replied. He nodded. And for a moment, we stood there. Not as we used to be, but not as we had been either. Something in between. Something new. How are you feeling? He asked. The question carried more weight now, more awareness, more caution. I feel like myself, I said. And that was the truth. He smiled slightly. I'm glad, he said. Claire never came. She didn't reach out, didn't try to explain, didn't try to repair anything, and I didn't expect her to. Because some people don't see what they've done as wrong. They see it as necessary. And there's no healing in that kind of thinking. Only distance. And sometimes, distance is exactly what's needed. Months later, I found myself sitting by the window one morning, a cup of coffee in my hands, sunlight spilling across the floor. Everything was quiet, not the heavy quiet I had felt before, but something lighter, easier, the kind of quiet that comes from knowing you are exactly where you should be. I thought about everything that had happened, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with understanding, because what Claire tried to take from me wasn't just control, it was identity, autonomy, the right to define my own life. And what Ethan almost lost was the ability to see clearly, to question, to trust his own judgment. But we both learned, in different ways, at different costs. And now, we were both standing in a different place, stronger, wiser, more aware. I took a slow sip of my coffee and looked out at the day ahead, unplanned, unstructured, mine. And for the first time in a long time, that was exactly what I wanted. There is a quiet danger in growing older, not in age itself, but in how others begin to see you. Sometimes people mistake experience for weakness, independence for vulnerability, and love for permission. What happened to me wasn't just about betrayal, it was about control disguised as care. It was about how easily someone can shape a narrative if you don't question what's being done to you. And most importantly, it was about remembering that your life, no matter your age, still belongs to you. Independence is not something you outgrow. It is something you protect, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means walking away from people you love, because dignity doesn't come from being taken care of. It comes from being respected, and respect begins with boundaries. If you've ever felt like someone was deciding what was best for you without truly listening, if you've ever been made to question your own clarity, I want you to remember this. Trust yourself. Your instincts matter, your voice matters, and your life is yours to lead. If this story resonated with you, I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever experienced something like this within your own family? And where are you watching from today? Don't forget to subscribe and share your perspective in the comments. Your voice might help someone else feel less alone.